Well, it's about that time, and go ahead and pass those out if you don't mind, please, Joe. And then if anybody comes in late, give them those. It's good to have everybody here this morning, and we'll go ahead and have a prayer and get going. Father, thank you for these men and for Miss Barb, for their desire to please you, their desire to do the right thing, their desire to handle the money that you put into our care wisely. I pray, Father, you would give me and each of us here wisdom to do that. Lord, you know this is not really my comfort zone, but you know I do want to be a help. And I pray some people and some churches would be helped by it, and that in the end, Christ would receive glory. Father, in our meeting that's coming, I pray in a special way your blessing on Brother Mike, Brother Josh as they preach to us. Please, Father, help, strengthen, encourage your men, build your churches. In Christ's name, amen. I guess before we start going over that, there's just a couple of general things. I think it's important we understand when it comes to handling our money, there's two perspectives. What does God think about what we do? And what does the government think about what we do? Okay, now I'm not ignorant of the group that I'm speaking to, and I are one of you. You know, we don't like government. In fact, generally speaking, the bigger the government, the more we distrust it. We are the most susceptible people in our entire culture to conspiracy theories because we distrust and don't like government. And so what happens is that attitude in general kind of bleeds over into how we handle our money from the government's perspective. I mean, Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's and unto God the things that are God's, which means, according to Jesus, there are some things that belong to Caesar. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar. And there's some things that belong unto God. Render unto God the things that belong unto God. I mean, understand that Caesar didn't ask what everybody thought. Caesar decided what Caesar wanted. And Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. I'm not here to talk this morning about when citizenship should rise up against their government. I'm here to just say, listen, it doesn't matter really that we don't like how Caesar handles things. Right. Well, by the way, that's the Bible. You and I don't like it all the time, but that's the Bible. Yeah. And so understand, when it comes to handling our money, there's what does God think? And, of course, we know that he wants integrity. And what does Caesar think? Now, and as we start, I'm sure some of the things we're going to go over, they're not going to be the way you were taught. They might not be the way you've handled them. They might be different from what good men have taught you. To me, this is not a sincerity issue from anything we're doing. I believe in this room are some very sincere, godly people. This is not a sincerity issue. I don't even think it's an integrity issue. I don't think anybody's sitting here saying, you know what, I'm looking to cheat Uncle out of how much ever I can cheat. I don't think that's the case. And so please, wherever I talk about something that's different, please, it is not an attack on you or your church. But I think we all understand that God chose to place us in a time not of decreasing but increasing government scrutiny. God, if you and I would have been better doing ministry in 1920, you know when we would have been here? 1920. God chose us for this day. And, I mean, when we hear about bills of the IRS hiring tens of thousands of extra agents and things going on in courts where there's segments of our culture that want to take away tax-exempt status from churches, I mean, this is our day. And so what might not have been important 50 years ago, I mean, understand it's increasingly important today. And if Christ tarries, it will be even more so in 10 years. And so this really matters. And some things that were okay in the past with the government, they're not now. And, you know, we need to be updated to some degree. And here's the problem. Most accountants, especially accountants that men in here are going to use, because a lot of times it's somebody in your church, your treasurer is, they're high integrity people. And a lot of people who are accountants, they're great at what they do, but understand that clergy is a special class of self-employed people that a lot of well-meaning accountants, it's just not something they're familiar with. They're not bad. It's just not something they're familiar with. And so, again, that makes this really, really important. That's, in fact, I asked my friend Barb Hayes to be here. She's an accountant. She does the accounting work for several different churches, lots of different pastors, and she's here really just to have my back. She is a godly, faithful lady who would be uncomfortable standing up here talking to you because of her nature and her faith, but I wanted her to be here in case you ask any questions that I can't answer. And again, if her answer is different than the other answers you're getting, I'm not here to argue with anybody. If you're going to be argumentative, just argue somewhere else. I'm here to do anything I can to help you. Because here's in the end, do what you want. You will answer to God for what you do, just like I do. And if Uncle decides to audit you, you will answer to Caesar. Okay? You don't answer to me. All right? And so if you could, we'll just save your questions to the end. Everybody should have a pad of paper. You can write it down so you don't lose it. Did you get one to everybody?
Most of them didn't want one.
Okay, well.
Anybody else want a pad of paper?
Yeah, just hold up your hand. He'll get that for you. And hold your questions to the end, because I may answer what you're going to say, later.
Thank you.
And when it comes to compensating church employees, there are lots of ways you can compensate them and help them. And you can see the four main places there is salary, housing allowance, retirement, and professional expenses. This, and you can pass this back, is a somewhat sanitized version of the compensation part of our church budget. I mean, understand that your salary needs to be approved by the church. And so whether you have an annual business meeting or whether you hand them a budget or however your methodology is, it needs to be approved by the church. And whatever your salary is, it's going to be subject to federal, state, and local taxes. Now, it's probably too late for anybody here, but you do have an option when you go into ministry to be exempt from Social Security. And so for everybody here, it's too late, and so I won't even bother talking about that. Now, in order for the salary, you don't have to document anything to the church to receive this. The church just pays you this salary. Now, at the end of the year, the government is going to require a W-2 or a 1099. You say, what is a 1099? You can go to Office Depot. This is what our treasurer does. He just buys a packet of 1099s. By law, anybody you compensate more than $599, you have to fill out a 1099. And by law, if you fill out a 1099 on them, they are required by law to claim that as their salary, as their income. Again, suppose that Susie Smith is sick and you decide as a church to take up an offering and you give her $700. You have to do a 1099. What we do when we do that kind of stuff for our people is we basically, we don't handle it through the church. We ask people to give cash or to write the check out to that person. And so it never goes through the church. Now, Barb probably might be putting her thumbs in her ears for that, but I look at that is an individual given to another individual in the church. And so it doesn't go on our books, it goes in our bulletin. Thank you for your generosity to Susie Smith, whatever I just named her. We were blessed for you as individuals to give her $700. And suppose you have somebody that does maintenance work around the church. You may not do this, but like say if you're unemployed and one of our church members, we will have you come up and we will give you stuff to do and pay you $12 an hour. By the way, that's equivalent to making $18 or $20 an hour. And you can only do that to $599. And after that, you have to give them a 1099. When we have a missionary in, we will give them $500 from the church. And then what I will say to everybody, I say, listen, they're back at their table. If God has stirred your heart, give them a green handshake. And so then we're basically, without it going in their income, our people will have the opportunity to be generous, and it doesn't go on a 1099. You say, well, I don't want to handle it. Do whatever you want. I'm just telling you, that's the law. Now, you can, if you have a missionary in and give him more than that, you can give it to, like if they're out of a local church, you can send it to that church, or you can send it to BIMI or whoever their organization is. But understand, that organization is going to give it to them as income. I mean, that organization has to either give them a W-2 or a 1099. That's for salary. That's one of the ways you compensate your people. Second way you compensate your people is housing allowance. And if you look on that budget there that I handed out to everybody, everybody on our staff has a salary and they have a housing allowance. Now, the housing allowance by law has to be approved by the church. By law, you can change it one time during a calendar year. Suppose at the beginning of the year, you think your housing allowance is going to, $17,000. Suppose your wife talks you into refinishing the basement. And so instead of 17, you spend 21. So now you can change it once over the course of the year. Now, your housing allowance is not subject to federal, state, and local taxes. It's not considered part of your income to receive government and health and food benefits. Now, for some of you who are blessed to work for bigger churches that are more well established without a lot of bills, they may compensate you very well. But understand that you giving somebody, paying them housing allowance instead of salary, it makes them eligible for more government benefits that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, a housing allowance, you do not document this to the church. When the church pays you every other week or once a month, it can all be in your check, your housing allowance and salary. But if the government checks on you, you have to document it to the government. Okay? But by the way, I was audited in Fairfield. I had to document my housing allowance to Fairfield. You can go ahead and pass these back to, wait a minute, let me divide that up and get it going down both ways. Now, some people in here, you are computer literate, and computers don't intimidate you. And other people, you like to do things by hand. And by the way, that's fine. Now, so your housing allowance, anything that's for your house. If you have a home phone still, that can be part of it. If you buy a lawnmower, if you buy a refrigerator, if you work on your house and you buy some tools for that job, you buy new carpeting, your gas and electric bill, your cable bill, anything that's for your house is part of your housing allowance, and it all counts. Okay? If you have an aquarium in your home, you can buy fish food for your aquarium. That's part of your housing allowance. If you buy a plant for your house, anything that's for your house counts for your house. But you have to document it to the government. Now, how you document it is up to you. For me personally, and again, you can see that sheet there that looks like this. It says itemized categories on there. My wife and I, we have one credit card, and we only use that credit card for housing things. We have another credit card that we use for everything else, but if it's any expense that has to do with housing, we put it on that credit card. Why? Super easy to keep track of. That credit card bill is all housing allowance. It's easy for us to document, and as long as you don't do something stupid like I have done, which is you just grab the wrong credit card and put gas in your car, you know, and because that doesn't count. But that's the way I document that. And so I bought QuickBooks, and I'm no accountant. And so basically, when I do my QuickBooks, I don't keep a manual checkbook record. It's in QuickBooks. All I do is everything that's housing allowance, I categorize it as housing allowance, and at the end of the year, I just print out that category. That works for me. That other one there, that's Brother Joe's. Brother Joe is not a computer person. That doesn't mean he can't use Word. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. But he's not comfortable buying QuickBooks and doing that. And so he basically he does his on a spreadsheet. And if the government calls him on the carpet for his housing allowance, he'll have to do more work than I do because he's got to gather together all his receipts and everything else. But that works too. I also have a worksheet for example for doing it. Listen, there's lots of ways you can document your housing allowance. All right? There's many ways. That's a worksheet. You can document it like that. With all these things, whenever it comes to organization, you've got to do what works for you. We're all not wired the same. We all don't have the same gifts or education. It's all fine. You've got to find what works for you to document what works for you. Now, again, the church does not need the documentation to give you this, but if you get audited, you will have to document all of your housing allowance. And what did I do with my top sheet already? Can I get another one of those sheets, please, of the top one that I asked you to make extra copies of because I already lost it. Well, thank you, Barb. See, thank you. Handing stuff out, I don't even have any business handing out. I've never done this before. My heart is I want our churches helped. I want our employees to get as much benefit from the government as they can get. Amen. Listen, the government takes and takes and takes and takes. Yeah. I don't know of anybody here that when the individual deduction changed from whatever it was, $4,500 a person to $12,000 a person, I don't know anybody in here that said, well, you know what, I don't want that new extra deduction. We don't do that. When the tax rate lowered from 15% to 12%, nobody in here said, what do you mean? I'm not paying less. Nobody here says, you want to send me money back? No way. You know, listen, we all understand that Caesar does what Caesar wants. And there's a little click that's not exactly right in our head when we take our tax return and we take the lowered income rate and we take the extra deduction, but somehow if our employees can get free government insurance or free food assistance, that's somehow dishonorable. I mean, think about the inconsistency in that. That's very inconsistent. And I don't know any heart but mine, and I, quite frankly, I don't like what I see in my heart a lot of times. But I think that there's a measure of pride that's linked with us saying, well, I'll take all this other government stuff, but I'm not going to take that. And so as we go down our list of housing allowance, document for the government, do you notice the last line under housing allowance? Anything unused turns into salary at the end of the year. And so if you overestimate your housing allowance, cannot document it, say you estimated $25,000, only can document $24,100, $900 of that becomes salary and becomes subject to federal, state, and local taxes. The third way you can help your compensate your employees is retirement. It needs to be approved by the church. It's not subject to federal, state taxes depending on the funds you choose. Now, you can choose places to put your retirement money that are not tax-free. Okay, so be careful where you have the church put it, but there are places that are not tax-free. There's also a lot of places that are. And so be careful where you put it. Notice that next line says often subject to local taxes. From what I understand, cities understand that a lot of their people when they retire are going to move away. And so they don't want to miss that opportunity to get that tax. And so now Fairfield, they were really loose on this, whoever our last person was, and whoever came in a year ago, man, they are like just, man, we're getting notices, all kinds of things, because our church, we didn't know that we're supposed to be deducting local taxes from that. We didn't know. Remember, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, to God the things that are God. And now we know, and now they're chasing us to have that all documented for the last 5 or 7 years. And so your retirement is subject to local taxes. Notice it's not considered part of your income to receive government, health, or food benefits, and should be sent directly by the church to eligible funds and institutions. Now you can, take from money from your salary and add to that, but the church can send it, and I think that's a little cleaner. And then the last way the church can compensate you is professional expenses. That must be approved by the church. It's not subject to federal, state, or local taxes. Now, for any of you who've worked in the business world and traveled at all, it's really the same thing. You go on a trip, you come back, and you fill out a T&E report, and you turn in your receipts for whatever your mileage was and meals and all that stuff. I mean, for instance, if you go out to lunch with someone from your church, that can be part of your professional expenses. Today, when you drove to this conference, your mileage can be part of your professional expenses. Here's an example of a report. Now this is not sent to you, given to you directly by the church with your salary and housing allowance. Housing allowance has to be documented for the government. Your professional expenses, they have to be documented for the church. And the church reimburses you for your professional expenses. Now that sheet that I handed out, that's just my professional expenses report from January. You cannot deduct your money to and from the office during a workday, just like a regular business person cannot. But on the other hand, when I come back for service on Wednesday night or on Sunday night, if I come into the office on Saturday or I have a meeting that's at a non-office time, that's all deductible. The rate for that, if you look on that sheet at the bottom, so this mileage rate says 0.670 per mile. That's determined by the government. They can change it every 6 months. They can raise it, they can lower it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You document your mileage. Notice the starting mileage on the top. Notice the ending mileage. And those things shouldn't match, because if you add 269 miles to 60,112, you don't get 60,751, because I had personal miles on my car. See, there's no mileage and reimbursement for personal miles. If I take Cody out to lunch, I can I can put that mileage on there, and I can put the meal on there. Now, in my case, our son is our youth pastor. Technically, I could take him out to lunch, take off the mileage, and write off the bill. I don't do that. You say, why? You could. Because I don't feel good about it. I mean, understand, remember, we have render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, render to God the things that are God. Now, you may, with a good conscience, be able to do something like that. I don't feel good in my conscience about that. I feel like that's just me going out with my family. And so when you work through this stuff, understand we're not going to always end up in exactly the same place. I mean, you have to have a good conscience before God. And you know, that might differ a bit among us, but we need to have high integrity. And you can see on January 1st, I went to Jim McTaggart's house. It was a home visit. I watched the Michigan final game at his house. Listen, when I go to his house, I'm still his pastor. Listen, I had to pray over the food. I mean, it's his house. I mean, listen, brother, pray over the pizza. You know, and I'm joking. But so all of those things matter. And you can just see how you document that. The reimbursable meals. And in the bottom, reimbursable expenses. You say you have a fish food for your office aquarium and that's on there for $52. That's ridiculous. What are your fish eating? They're eating mysis shrimp and not bloodworms, beef heart. And that's like a couple months' supply, but that aquarium's in my office. Okay? It's 1,000 dum-dum suckers for children. You know, I'm meaner than most people by nature, and I sound nasty. And so from the time we started the church, I stuffed my pockets with dum-dum suckers, and every kid from the time we've started, I give a sucker. And right now, I put 37 suckers in my pocket on Sunday morning, and 33 in there on Sunday night, and sometimes they're gone. And then I put 32 or 33 in there on Wednesday night. That's a lot of dum-dums, just to make people like me better. But the point of it is it's a business expense. All right? Technically, if I went to someone's wedding here, I could put down what I give them. I can't do that with a good conscience. Okay? I'm giving that to them as someone other than a professional pastor. Again, but you can. And so there's a lot of areas where you're going to have to decide where you are on this thing. And I give this report to our treasurer, just like our other men do, and they reimburse that up to what's approved in the budget. And you can see, you know, that's extra compensation for your staff. It's not taxable. You know, they're going to, listen, you men go out to eat and stuff with your people anyway. And so it's just extra compensation. I mean, many of you would have come to this pastor's fellowship anyway, but 24 miles at 64 cents a mile, you know, okay, I got $12 back and I spent $3 worth of gas. What is that? It's compensation. And so there are a lot of ways that we can help those who we employ that are legal and are helpful. So professional expenses approved by the church. Not.
Brother Wallach, this is the one where all 14 of my churches that I do had it mixed up when I first got them. They used to give an allowance, an auto allowance. That's not legal. It has to be accountable. The key word for the government is your pastor has to account back, or your staff. I still have one church I'm trying to get off of allowance, and an allowance has been shot down by the government every year on every court case. You can't just say, I'm going to take a $500 professional allowance. It has to be accountable. If it's not accountable, you're in violation, and it's considered salary when you get audited.
Does it have to be on a separate check? Does it have to be separate from, say, a payroll check?
It does not, but in most cases, because it's accountable, it's done once a month instead of when the payroll's paid. If you pay payroll twice a month or twice every 2 weeks, typically your pastors aren't reporting that often. So we typically see in our office that it's done monthly on a separate check, but it does not have to be. We have one church in Indianapolis, they report every pay period. Their guys turn in their mileage and their professional loans. and we do it as a non-tax reimbursement. But trust me, it is a big area the government hates, and so they attack it. Don't use that word, I gave my pastor an allowance, that doesn't fly.
And Ms. Barb, when you say accountable, you mean this form right here that we do monthly?
Yes, I mean, it has to be accounted back to the treasurer, he has to say, yep, he met his professional allowance that he's asking for this month. And I have one church, they allow their pastors to take some mission trips for their professional allowance, and a couple of their, and I don't get in the middle of that. They need to see the law, and they need to, I'll tell them straight out, allowance doesn't work, but their pastors take their biggest part of their professional allowance in a lump sum to take a group to wherever, because their church can't pay for it.
Can I take this one more step to ask one more question? If I pay a missionary, say a missionary comes to our church,
Yeah,
and I know I'm gonna be giving him more than $599,
Yeah.
and a portion of that is because I'm gonna pay his travel expense.
doesn't count, doesn't go on the 1099.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Do I need to put that on a separate check, or can I include that, just put a note?
You can do it either way. I do it
And
on
do
our,
I need this from him to do that?
you need a copy of his receipts. Just staple them to your reimbursement.
We use separate checks for it.
A lot of people do. You don't have to,
Yeah.
but a lot of people do.
Okay, a follow-up for that. If I'm paying, because I've done the same thing, if I'm paying travel, do I need receipts from him for that travel?
You should.
Okay,
You should.
Should.
If you get audited by the government, my last church audit, they wanted to see those receipts.
okay, all right.
I just wanted you to get
No,
that.
no,
This is
it's good.
the biggest area where it's messed up in all the churches. I do 14 churches a month, and they can't get this straight. So,
Anything unused, you see the last line in professional expenses, is just lost. Use it or lose it. Remember, housing allowance, anything unused turns into salary. Professional expenses, it's just lost. And it's because, again, it has to be documented and reimbursed. If you notice on the bottom there, for household size, this is the government's threshold for free insurance. And remember, housing does not count, professional allowance doesn't count, which basically means almost all younger employees that have children in their home, if you properly pay them, they will get free insurance. And as far as food goes, the numbers are different. If a household, suppose you're a family of 4, you have 2 adults and 2 children, you can make a monthly max income of $3,250 and get up to $713 in food allowance. So I'm not going to take that. Well, don't. Now, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't look at it any differently than the government changing our tax rate from 15 to 12, or changing our personal deduction from $4,500 or whatever it was to $12,000. Listen, it's a way that you can help your people. There was a long time in our movement where basically the philosophy was, Lord, you keep them humble, we'll keep them poor. And when the New Testament teaches that if you labor in the word and doctrine, you're worthy of double honor. And that's not to mean that I'm implying I think pastors should make twice as much as the average person in their congregation, but I do think it's very reasonable that the pastor should be as compensated as well as some of your better employed people in the church. And if you can help listen, we had a lot of people who were really, really strong, and they were able to stay in ministry making $15,000 a year. But we had a lot of people who weren't strong enough to do that, but they were strong enough if someone would have paid them well and come alongside them, they might have made it. I wonder how many less people we have pastoring churches today because they were mishandled financially as young men in ministry. Hey, listen, brethren, we don't live in 1950. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to look around and understand people aren't as tough as they used to be. And so what we need to do, we need to be coming alongside people and helping them as much as possible, not making it as difficult as possible to serve the Lord. Listen, Satan will make it difficult. we need to be a help whenever we can. And before we open up for questions, I have one other thing. Again, those numbers for on that sheet, those are for insurance. And in most cases, they won't have to change doctors. Now, it's about, I think it's 130% instead of 100% that those are. So the food numbers require bigger numbers. But listen, there's a lot of ways that people can be helped and serve in ministry. But we've got to handle how we compensate them wisely. The last thing I wanted to hand out to you is a couple of examples of giving statements. Because at the end of the year, I think probably everybody in here knows that the church is responsible for giving everybody who gave, passing out everyone who gave a giving statement at the end of the year.
Absolutely.
And now that meant a lot prior to President Trump's tax changes. Because prior to his tax changes, a lot of people did individual deductions. With the $12,000 individual deduction base, most people in your church aren't doing individualized deductions anymore. But it's still, we're supposed to do it. There's two key things. One of those is good because it lists what was given by transaction. And one of those is bad because it just lists a summary of what was given. Now, again, you do whatever you want, but if you get called on the carpet or your people get called on the carpet, the government wants something that has the individual lines and then some statement along the lines that's along the neighborhood of that statement. No goods or services were received for that, and both of those have those. And so we've covered a lot of material. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Brother Gary.
Just wonder what software your church uses for accounting.
We use QuickBooks.
You use QuickBooks?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, Trevor.
I have a couple. The housing allowance, is there at one point where it's just too much? Right? Should it be less than what the pastor's salary is, or can it be?
From what I understand, and Barb can correct me on this, if you can document it, then it's acceptable. But understand always, whenever you're dealing with the government, when things don't balance out, like a flag goes up and they say, you know what, I'm going to look at you. This past year, my wife and I redid our basement. She got some inheritance. Her dad passed away. She wanted to redo the basement. And so this year, our housing allowance is like $17,000 or $18,000 more than usual. I'm expecting a call from Uncle. I'm making sure I'm dotting my I's and crossing my T's. Is it legit? Yes. But so as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong in that, Barb. As long as you can document it and it's legit, you're all right.
We have 3 pastors out of the 14 that only take, their churches are very small, they only take housing allowance, no salary. We have not been audited on them, I think because it's a small amount. As Wally said, there's a percentage in the IRS system. The average giving across the United States is less than 1%. I've been audited twice on my charitable giving. And because my percentage is not less than 1%.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, praise the Lord. It's all his anyway. So we were given a paper audit the first time, which meant we had to send in every document. And it was all because the guy auditing me, he was auditing 5 pastors that day, by the way, me and 5 pastors. He stated, why that audit took place, and it was all about the percentages they have in their system. So if you're out of Wall, you're going to get it. Doesn't mean you automatically get an audit. Just means in my 30 years, I've had 6 audits in my firm. Once was a pastor, once was me for my charitable giving, and the rest were businesses. They aren't consistent. They're really messed up right now. But 3 of my pastors only take housing. So to answer your question, it can be completely housing if you can justify it, but it will get you in the higher audit category. Doesn't mean you'll get audited. And Wally's documents are very, very good, so he's gonna be okay. It's just a 6-month process, even if they just, it's a long, wasted time process, and it's very, very horrible. I don't know another word, it's horrible. And the statement he gave you with the summary of all the tithes, instead of, just in October of 2020, a big church that you all would identify got all their tithes thrown out for all their people because they sent out summaries. The court said, you can't go back and fix it, none of those people can claim their tithes. Yeah, so do it right the first time. I mean, it's simple to, just itemize it, and if you aren't good with QuickBooks, sign up for the $14 Planning Center opt. Planning Center is an app, and if your giving is 100 people, 100 donors or less, it's $14 a month to plunk in their name. It emails the statements if you want through encryption, or you can print them out and mail them. Largest church I have is in Indianapolis, and we use Planning Center. We send 93% of the statements out through email encryption, and people love it. And it's very cheap. It goes up if you have more than 100 donors, but it's a very cheap option if you're not a QuickBooks person.
Very good. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one more. The housing allowance that's left over that now requires to be.
Go move to salary, yes?
Does the church have to then issue 1099 for that?
No, it goes on the church either issues a 1099 or W-2 for everybody that they compensate more than $599. And so the W-2 or 1099, however they pay you, will just reflect that as salary.
It's in the system. When I go to put Wally's in my system, it says, hey, his housing allowance was, I don't know, 30,000. Did he meet that? Did he give you receipts? And I say yes for 28,000 or yes for 30, and it flips the other two over to wages. So it's on the pastor's responsibility once the church is already. So he stood up in front of the deacons and said, I'm going to designate this, this, this. That went into the business meeting. Now they've issued a 1099 or a W-2 in his case. The W-2 comes to his tax preparer or himself, and there's a line in your taxes that says, did you justify that? And if you didn't, the rest flips to wages. It doesn't have to be done on a document.
All right, so this thing says here that you don't have to document the housing allowance to the church.
Yes.
So would I know then that I'm supposed to have an extra W-2 written to cover that?
Well,
This is box 14 of your W-2.
yeah, it's a box on the W-2 there for housing and salary. And so
Okay, but yeah, so we
the
do-
church approves the amount.
Right, so there's an amount that's for housing, an amount
Yes.
for salary, and that's on the W-2. So what you're saying now is that the pastor doesn't spend all that housing. Well, what this says is he's got to justify what he spent and didn't spend.
Yes.
But you're saying if he didn't spend it, the church has got to
Yes.
get it added to the W-2 as unspent.
I can answer this question.
Go ahead.
Last year, I did not spend all my housing allowance.
Yeah.
Last year, I was $1,200 short roughly of my house. And all I do is, when I do my taxes, it just converted that to salary.
Right,
and
right,
I
but
paid-
I didn't.
And I had to
so-
pay taxes
right,
on it.
So
So the
that's what I
church
would
didn't
assume.
have to do anything.
I would assume, but I thought you were saying that we had to have the W-2 updated to
No,
everybody.
no. W-2 stays with whatever you deemed to the business meeting or the deacons or however you do it at your church where you put it in the minutes. The W-2 says salary X amount,
Right.
housing X amount.
Yep.
When you go to do your taxes, you are the one who settles that up then.
Okay, so that's on the pastor to settle that up. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Very good. Any other questions? Yeah, Brother Greer.
In the case of donations, it used to be, we do this, I just don't know if it's changed. Anything over 250 has to have a letter written. The statement doesn't work. Do you know if that's still?
To the best of my knowledge, and Barb can correct me, if someone donates something, say it's a piano, you put on church stationery what they donated, but you do not assign a value to that.
No, I'm not talking about property, I'm saying monetary. If they give 250 over, as I understand,
At what point does the church become responsible to generate the statement?
the statement, exactly.
$240 in one single gift. If I've got like 11 people that give $100, I don't have to send them a statement, but I send it because it reminds them and it might get them to give again. So I send it no matter but not a letter each time, just an end-year statement with all their itemized giving.
So we don't, okay, so all of them can be on the same
Sure,
letter? Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay,
no.
good, all right.
Now, if somebody gives appreciated stock, or if they give out of their IRA, which happens a lot, you do give a separate letter for that,
Okay,
and that doesn't go on your statement.
okay.
So Barb, you're saying for Brother Greer, this statement here would be sufficient?
Correct. And you don't have to issue that unless it's over $240, but I do it for every single one, $25, $10, I send them all out. Get a lot of memorials when someone passes in your church and it might be $50, I send it out.
Ma'am, what would be the procedure if you just flew by the seat of your pants, as they say, for many, many years, but a church now wants to, what would be the first steps you would take if I or another pastor would say, ma'am, would you get everything at our church in order? What would be the steps?
Well, you look at what the church is currently doing, and then you begin to put it on the right software or the right procedures so that you're reconciling the bank account every month. You're making sure that those statements are being populated weekly. So when the counting team does the deposit slip, you're taking that, putting it in some system, so you're not running around December 31st trying to add everybody's donations up. That doesn't work, it's never right. There's so many good tools right now that aren't that expensive.
I think we've always been legal. I've never had any problems. However, at this stage of my life, you know, I'm looking at retiring or giving the mantle to someone else in a few years. I was just wondering about a professional accountant. You come in, what steps do you take from nothing? You just get the books or whatever and set the church on a completely legal per the government's
Well, and
portion
Wally did that.
requirements now.
When he
I-
started this church, that's what he had to do.
Yeah,
They had nothing.
yeah, we had nothing. And you start this. You begin to compensate your people in these four manners, and you begin to bring to the church, you know, some kind of a budget approval of whatever these numbers are, and you just begin to do that. I mean, the collection and the receiving and all that is separate. You know, I mean, that's outgoing. You know, there are good financial procedures for receiving also, but that's not really what this is about. The crux of this is, I believe, we have a lot of good, sincere men who just haven't been educated on this, and that we have a lot of men who are living on a lot less income than they might otherwise be living if our churches would compensate them in a way that Caesar recognizes. And that's really the purpose of this. But that's how I would start it, Brother Bill. Begin to compensate people in those four manners.
Yeah, well,
Begin
actually,
to communicate.
we do this, but I don't know that it doesn't need some formalization.
Yeah.
You know, to work.
Just some cleanup, sure.
But let me say thank you, Wally, for this session, and I pleaded with him, asked him to do this, and I think he's very gracious, and as you can tell from our attendance at the session today, it's very insightful, and I, for one, greatly value all this information.
Yeah, thank you for the encouragement.
And I will certainly strive to put all of it into use.
Yeah.
And
Any other questions, Brother Greer?
Yeah, if you could just speak to one other thing. Early on, you were talking about the 1099s, and you said that you have, if I remember right, you said you had a service or something that handled your 1099s?
No, we go to Home Office Depot and you buy a packet.
So you do all in-house?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you, say for instance, you have a preacher coming in, you know he's an evangelist. You're
Yeah.
not getting more than, $5.99.
Yeah.
What is your procedure? Because honestly, I feel kind of awkward about this sometimes when I hand them or someone hands them a W-9 and said, I need to fill this out because you have to have their social security number.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
We don't give them the 1099 when we give them the money. When we get to the end of the year and our treasurer does the giving reports, they send out the 1099s.
So, but
But-
how do you get your social security, because the social security
That's the
number?
W-9, and you're correct, and you do have to get that, the treasurer gets it when he comes, or before he
Yeah.
comes, or.
You do it before, or when he gets here? or-
Well, again, we go out of our way to compensate people in a way that there's no 1099 required.
Right,
You know, and so what Barb's talking about, you know, that you would have to get them to fill out that information then when you give it to them. Or you can do what Brother Barry does, is instead of giving it to them, give it to their organization, and their organization will count it as salary. Or you can do what we do, which is play around with how you handle the money. You know, we don't give them above $599. Our people individually, that is not on their charitable giving. It is them as a believer in Christ just being charitable. And so we open the door for that and close the door on the paperwork.
Well, the majority of my churches don't do it the way Brother Wally does, and they do just, when they're engaging with that person to come, hey, well, you're gonna come, we're gonna need this, this, and this, we need your travel expenses so we can reverse it, we need this W-9, and right then they do it. And they're used to it, they're used to it, because that's how most are being, it's very unusual this day and age that you're not asked for a W-9.
And I guess that's it. I just, you know, as a
Makes
church, you
you
feel
feel-
kind of funny. It's the Caesar versus God,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And you're saying, you know, hey, brother, great, I want you to minister this,
Yeah.
fill this out. You know,
But in
it's just-
most cases, sir, they have mileage and they have
Right.
so many things to if they're doing their taxes right,
Right.
they're going to be able to write so many things off.
I think there's a lot of course correction going on in our segment of Christianity where there was no reckoning to Caesar whatsoever. And that course is being corrected. And so, like Barb says, people who would have thought 10 years ago, well, you know, now it happens all the time. You had a question?
Yeah, are you able to, like, if it's him and his wife, or if it's a group, can you give, like, you know, 500 to this one, 500 to this one? Can you break it up that way?
I've never done that. I don't know whether it's legal or not.
Again, most of the time we just W-9 them in our set of 14 churches that I deal with. They just are so aware that the IRS is targeting churches so hard right now that we just don't mess. We just give them a W-9 and move on.
I think that's the best advice. That's why I don't mess with that. You know, again, I would hope our missionaries that come in, our people would just give them cash, $500 or $600. I hope, you know, but I don't know. You know, we just stay under the radar. Yeah, Joe.
Ms. Barb, you say you don't like the word allowance, auto allowance, whatever. We use the word housing allowance. It's in
Well,
our
allowance,
document.
that's different though. The
That's a
allowance
government
for
term.
housing is a set thing by the government. Professional allowances are professional reimbursements now. So that changed back in the 80s.
So I guess my question is that the way we use it is still sufficient?
Oh, yeah,
for
you
housing
guys
allowance.
do a great job here, reimbursing accountable plans. We have, out of 14 churches, we had 12 of them that were using, I would give him $500 a month to cover his car.
Right.
No, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that used to be the way back in the 80s. You could do if you're a pastor that's been in the place a long time, you know the clergy law has changed so much and it's so muddy. It's a frustrating area of the law, but you can't give them an allowance for their car or their books anymore. There has to be accountability, and that's the key word.
Amen. Josh, you had a question?
Yeah, what do you guys do? Do you guys do a 1099 for your staff, or do you guys do
We do W-2s for the staff, and then anyone else that makes over $599. I mean, if an evangelist comes here, you know, we will give them more than that, like for doing the revival. We always give them a 1099. We don't do W-2s for anyone other than our staff. Yes. Again, a lot of this stuff that,
Churches W-2 their staffs. We went away from 1099s back from the 80s because they had so many allowances back then, and you could really help the pastor. Now it's clearer on the W-2.
So the $599, is that per incident, or is that cumulative on the year?
it's cumulative on the year. Yeah.
Keep track of it if you.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, when we have somebody who's unemployed here, we will pay them $12 an hour here to come up to the church and work, you know, do stuff. There's always stuff to do, but we don't do that for more than $599. Yeah, Bill?
Brother Wally, yeah, the household size and income, I didn't catch what you said before, and with insurance,
Yeah, this, on that top sheet, that household size,
Yeah.
you know, if you have a mom and a dad and 2 kids, your household size is 4.
right?
And that means you could have salary up to $39,900 and get free insurance. No copays, no deductibles, free. I mean, it's worth thousands of, it's a very,
So if we're doing Samaritan, we can,
no, you can go, yeah, no, you go to an, it's Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Yeah, Medicaid, and you basically, you get a Medicaid card, yeah. And the food thing, again, is an incredible benefit, but the numbers are different. Any other questions? We got about 3 more minutes. Yeah, Brother Ken?
Do you use QuickBooks? Do you advise QuickBooks over Quicken?
First of all, you're asking the wrong question.
Quicken is home use for your home checkbook. Quicken is great if you're doing that for home. For your church, you'd have to
Yeah.
do QuickBooks. You can't use Quicken for your church.
Yeah, I use Quicken at home. I think it costs me maybe $45 a year, and honestly, I put it on my professional expenses because the only reason I do it is to keep track of my housing allowance.
Same thing with mileage apps. They're wonderful right now. There's some
Yeah.
great mileage apps.
Great point.
You can write that right off your professional allowance. I use MileIQ. It's my favorite because you swipe left for business, right for personal. It sends a little email to you every Monday with where you went and if you didn't classify it.
Yeah, see, now again, like for me, for my mileage, I keep this little book in my car, and I write down every day at the end of the day when I pull in my garage, anything I did, where I went that was not just me driving to the office. And then on that report, like I gave you an example from January, I don't write down everything in that's on this. If I went 3 places, I'll just write the one that was the highest mileage. And then I keep this also. Like Barb says, there are a lot of apps now, phone apps, where you can keep track of your mileage too. Now, me, that's not really a good way for me to organize. But when it comes to personal organization, I mean, everybody in here is going to be a little different. The key is that you get personally organized and find a system that works for you.
If you're going to keep it by hand, write your odometer down at the beginning of every month. And we just had an audit. Good Christian man, wonderful Christian man, and he's got the best records I've ever seen. And they dinged him 20% for not writing his odometer down monthly. And we took it to the next court, and we got back 10 of the 20%, because he's so organized. It made me so angry. But they did take 10% because he didn't. We even went and got his oil changes, and that's how we got the 10% back to show, how they put your mileage on your oil changes. So
Yeah.
write your odometer down if you're going to.
Yeah, that's why that report shows the before and after odometer. Listen, it's Uncle.
Yeah.
And they're coming after churches. God did not place us today to fail. Jesus said, on this rock I'll build my church, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And so that means there's a way you and I can succeed and do the work of Christ today in America. But we need to shore up some of these things. Thank you for coming. Miss Barb, thank you so much. You certainly added a level of expertise I'm completely incapable of doing. I hope you all will stay for the rest of the Pastor's Fellowship. There's coffee, orange juice, milk, and donuts over in the main entrance foyer.